The Gate Tacticker is a little easy to install gadget for AGs and HPA-M4s. It replaces the safety lever and features an adjustable trigger brake. This is a great add-on for optical DTUs as it provides a response that's normally missing. That's something I like as an addition for the Sparklabs Wolf engine. So I'm happy to say that the Gate Tacticker is now also available in my store at perfectairsoft.com for fans of that engine. It is a good upgrade. The design also transfers the trigger force straight into the side of the gearbox shell, which is better than transferring the force into the PCB itself, as that could cause the PCB to move around. Downside is you lose the safety blocking feature. Inside the Tacticker device is a little spring and 2 steel balls. When this rod is pushed by the trigger, it pushes the bottom ball up and out of a groove, and this requires significant force to do so. This is how the trigger brake feeling is created. It's not perfect, it feels very clinical and not actually like a real AR trigger, but it does provide a very high brake force. You'll need to be confident in taking apart your AG to install the Gate Tacticker. Once you have the gearbox apart, you remove most of the parts inside, including the safety lever. Take the Tacticker and set the top screw so there's a fair amount of force required to make it click. The force required to make it click even at the lowering settings will be quite high, so don't worry about that. For now, don't apply any thread lock, that part comes later. Then simply put the Tacticker in, like so, and use the included screw to hold it in place. First, we'll fine-tune the trigger brake itself. Reassemble the gearbox with just the Tacticker and a trigger installed. And now you should be able to feel the trigger pull. At this stage, you can already feel how much force is required, but if you want to truly understand what it feels like to push it when you're actually firing the AG, you have to put it into the receiver and put the motor grip on so you can get a proper grip. But that's up to you if you want to go so far with the process. Now, depending on how strong the brake force is here, we can then adjust the top screw up here in and out. So if I adjust it further in, now it will have a stronger trigger brake. Once you're done, you apply some medium thread lock to the top screw. And to the screw on the other side here. This is important because otherwise they'll move out of position over time. For this purpose, I'm using the 4UAD blue thread locker. That is a good fit for this application. Also, make a quick check with the ETU installed to make sure that the Gate Tacticker is not hitting any components on the ETU. Additionally, you want to check that the trigger can interact correctly with the push rod sticking out of the Tacticker. Included with the Gate Tacticker are 3 O-rings of 3 different thicknesses. These are meant to sit around the top of the Gate Tacticker to prevent it from tilting into the wall of the gearbox. Personally, I've used the Gate Tacticker without any of these O-rings and that worked just fine. If you find the trigger brake to be too strong, even at its lowest point, you can use a lighter spring. When adjusting the Gate Tacticker, there's a maximum and a minimum point it can be adjusted to. If you go below the minimum point, which I think is around 500 grams of brake force, the trigger will start to behave weird and not give a proper click response. In this case, you can use a lighter spring instead to lower the whole adjustment range. Now there's only one spring included from Gate themselves, but it's quite easy to fashion a lighter spring from, for example, a tablet plate spring or similar. By doing this, you can have a brake force that is more like the normal button actuated ETUs rather than the optical ones. First, I'm going to show how I tested with the stock spring installed. The lowest force comes in at about 1 kilo. Any lower than this, and the stock spring will have a mushy trigger pull instead of a proper click. That's still pretty high and is on par with a GBB pistol. Now I'm going to test it with the spring at the highest setting. Here it comes in at about 3.2 kilograms. Any higher than this and the system will actually lock up instead of functioning. The force here, 3 kilo, is on par with or stronger than a real M16. This is way too much and I can't imagine anyone playing with it this way. Now I'm testing with a weaker spring, which is not included. At the lowest setting, the force comes into about 0.5, 0.6 kilograms. This is a very subtle feeling and on par with pushing a normal ETU switch. Now I have adjusted it up to the highest setting again, but with the weak spring. Here we see 1.4 kilograms of force. I would say a force around 600 to 800 grams with my tool setup is what most people would find comfortable to play with. But that's based on how I use my tools. A real trigger break system might show actually different numbers. Additionally, there is a reset spring inside, which also adds about 300 grams that you should deduct from these numbers. The Gate Tacticker won't be compatible with all gearboxes or ETUs, but it does fit with most. You lose the safety blocker function, so your ETU must have a non-physical safety mode like Gate ETUs do. The Tacticker is compatible with Gate Aster and Titan 2. It's also compatible with the Sparklabs Wolf ECU. Some of the T238 ETUs should also be able to fit. Basically, you can look at any ETU, and if the area around or under the Tacticker is not too crowded with components, it'll probably fit. So let me know in the comments what you thought of this quick review, and if you used the Gate Tacticker before, I'd like to hear what you think.